Golden Age of Piracy. The Golden Age of Piracy, 1715 to 1726. Close your eyes and picture a pirate. Black flag, cutlass, maybe a parrot on the shoulder. Almost everything you're imagining right now comes from one 11-year stretch of history called the Golden Age of Piracy, and it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of a peace treaty. In 1713, the War of the Spanish Succession ended. Britain won, but the Royal Navy demobilized nearly 36,000 men within 2 years, and hundreds of privateers lost their commissions overnight. Trained sailors with no other skills were dumped onto the docks with no work, while Spanish patrol ships kept seizing English vessels in the Caribbean and torturing their crews. The spark came in 1715, when a hurricane wrecked a Spanish treasure fleet off Florida. A band of ex-privateers, Henry Jennings, Benjamin Hornigold, Edward Teach, Charles Vane, raided the salvage camp and made off with the silver. With nowhere else to go, they took over a half-abandoned Bahamian settlement, Nassau. Within 2 years, more than 2,000 pirates had flooded in, calling it the Republic of Pirates. From that one harbor came the names you already know: Blackbeard, Charles Vane, Calico Jack Rackham, and Bonny, Bartholomew Roberts. The British government finally broke the era with pardons and mass hangings, and by 1726 the Golden Age was over. But in 11 years it gave you almost every pirate story you've ever heard. Blackbeard. If the Golden Age has one face, it's this one. Edward Teach was born around 1680 near Bristol, England, and worked as a privateer during the war. When peace ended his job, he joined the pirate Benjamin Hornigold at Nassau and rose fast. In November 1717, Teach captured a French slave ship and renamed her the Queen Anne's Revenge as Blackbeard. He understood that reputation was a weapon. He braided his beard, tucked slow-burning fuses into it during battle so his head looked like it was smoking, and let terror do the fighting for him. In May 1718, he blockaded Charleston and ransomed hostages, not for gold, but for a chest of medicine. Then his flagship ran aground off North Carolina, and he took a pardon from a corrupt governor, Charles Eden, who quietly took a cut of his plunder in exchange for silence. It didn't last. Virginia's governor sent an illegal cross-border expedition after him, and that fight gets its own spot further down this list. The Republic of Pirates at Nassau. Before Blackbeard, there was the place that made him possible. Nassau's harbor was too shallow for Royal Navy warships but perfect for pirate sloops, so the town became untouchable and oddly functional. Captains were elected. Crews signed written articles covering plunder shares, wound compensation, and punishments. It was the closest thing the era produced to a democracy. At its peak, 1,000 to 2,000 pirates lived there, alongside tavern keepers, often women, who controlled the town's alcohol and information. The population was unusually mixed. Escaped slaves, free black sailors, and Europeans of several nations lived and voted together, mostly because a crew valued usefulness over background, though those same crews still sold captured slaves as cargo. It ended in July 1718, when Governor Woodes Rogers arrived with warships and a royal pardon. Most pirates took the deal. Those who didn't were hanged and gibbeted at the harbor entrance. Captain Kidd and the Buried Treasure legend. If you've ever seen a treasure map with an X on it, thank this man, even though he probably didn't deserve the reputation. William Kidd was a respectable New York captain hired in 1695 by Whig investors, backed by King William III, to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean. The voyage fell apart. He lost his best crew to press gangs, faced a mutinous replacement crew, and in 1697 killed his own gunner with a bucket in a dispute. He also captured the Quebec Merchant, a ship carrying French passes that arguably made her a legal prize. Before facing arrest, Kidd buried part of his treasure on Gardiner's Island, and that single act created the entire buried pirate treasure legend. Hunters have dug from Long Island to the Caribbean for 3 centuries and found nothing. Kidd was tried in London in 1701, hanged at Wapping, and the French passes that would have cleared him vanished before the trial, only resurfacing 2 centuries later. And Bonny and Mary Red. You've probably assumed pirates were an all-male world. These two would change your mind fast. And Bonny, born around 1700 in Ireland, left her husband in Nassau for the pirate captain Calico Jack Rackham. Mary Read had spent much of her life disguised as a man, in the army, then at sea, before ending up on Rackham's crew. In October 1720, when a Jamaican sloop caught the ship at anchor, most of the crew was drunk below deck. Bonny and Read stayed on deck to fight, with Read reportedly firing into the hold at her own cowering crewmates. Rackham was hanged. Both women were convicted too, but pleaded their bellies. Pregnancy delayed execution. Read died of fever in prison. Bonny simply disappears from the record. And if stories like that pull you in, this is exactly the kind of history we cover every week. So if you haven't already, hit subscribe, because the next name on this list beat even Blackbeard's numbers. Bartholomew, Black Bart Roberts. Ask historians who the most successful pirate ever actually was, and it's not Blackbeard. Welsh-born Roberts was press-ganged into piracy in 1719 and elected captain almost immediately after his own captor was killed. In under 3 years he took more than 400 ships, a record nobody has matched. He raided a Portuguese treasure convoy off Brazil, captured the governor of Martinique, and dressed the part. Red waistcoat, feathered hat, a diamond cross meant for the King of Portugal. He died on February 10, 1722, at the Battle of Cape Lopez, killed instantly by grapeshot. Per his own standing orders, his crew threw his body into the sea so it couldn't be captured. Over 100 of his men were later tried. 52 were hanged. The Battle of Ocracoke, Blackbeard's last fight. Here's the fight you've been waiting for. In late 1718, Virginia's governor sent Lieutenant Robert Maynard after Blackbeard, funding the expedition himself since he had no legal authority over North Carolina. Maynard's ships reached Ocracoke Inlet on November 21st, and the next morning both of his sloops ran aground approaching Blackbeard's ship, killing his surprise attack and costing 24 men to a single broadside. Believing he'd won, Blackbeard boarded, straight into a trap. Maynard's hidden crew swarmed up from below deck. The two men fought hand to hand until, by most accounts, a Scottish Highlander in Maynard's crew severed Blackbeard's head. He'd taken 5 gunshot wounds and over 20 sword cuts. The whole fight lasted about 6 minutes. Maynard mounted the head on his bowsprit and later displayed it at Hampton Roads as proof the most feared man on the Atlantic was dead. Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen of Ireland. Push your timeline back 2 centuries earlier because a different kind of pirate was already negotiating with a monarch as an equal. Grace O'Malley, born around 1530, led the O'Malley clan's fleet along Ireland's west coast, collecting tolls and raiding those who refused to pay. Legitimate rights by Irish custom, piracy by English law. She was imprisoned in Dublin Castle in 1577, described by her captor as a most famous feminine sea captain. In 1593, after English forces imprisoned her son and seized her property, Grace sailed to England and met Queen Elizabeth I face-to-face at Greenwich, reportedly refusing to bow, meeting her as one ruler to another. The meeting won her son's release and her land back. She died around 1603, the same year as Elizabeth. Qing Shi, commander of the largest pirate fleet in history. Forget the Caribbean, the most powerful pirate who ever lived ran the South China coast in the early 1800s. A former Cantonese sex worker who married the pirate commander Zheng Yi, she became known as Zheng Yi Sa, or Qing Shi. When her husband died in 1807, she took direct command of the entire fleet, an estimated 50,000 to 70,000 pirates across hundreds of ships, larger than most national navies. She ran a strict pirate code. Plunder had to be registered, and assaulting a female captive without marrying her meant execution, and in 1809 her fleet even fought off British East India Company warships. By 1810, facing pressure, she negotiated her own surrender, retired to Canton with a noble title, ran a gambling house, and died peacefully in 1844. If a fleet of 70,000 pirates didn't get you to tap subscribe, stick around for one more. You're about to go further back than anything else on this list. The Cilician pirates and the kidnapping of Julius Caesar. Now go back almost 2,000 years before Blackbeard, to the coast of what's now southern Turkey. By the 1st century BCE, the Cilician pirates were the ancient world's most organized maritime force, fortified coastal communities running a massive slave trade and allied with Rome's enemy, Mithridates 6. Their most famous victim was a 25-year-old Julius Caesar, captured in 75 BCE and held for a 20-talent ransom. According to Plutarch, Caesar mocked the sum as too low and told them to demand 50 instead, then spent 38 days living among his captors, half-jokingly promising to crucify them all once freed. They laughed. He wasn't joking. The moment he was released, he hunted them down and had them crucified on his own authority. The Cilician pirates weren't finally broken until 67 BCE, when Pompey cleared the entire Mediterranean in under 3 months, not just by killing pirates but by resettling thousands onto farmland, on the theory that piracy came from poverty, not character. It worked, and it's the starting point for every pirate story you've heard today.